HHS telling Governor J.B. Pritzker show the receipts on welfare spending as the governor prepares to sign an energy bill that opponents say is going to increase energy rates by $8 billion over the span of time. That's what we're going to be focusing on here with Illinois in Focus. Each and every weekday morning with you, I'm Greg Bishop, editor at Illinois for the Center Square. You can go to thecentersquare.com, get the newsletter in your inbox. It's free and open to you to let you know how, as a taxpayer, your government's impacting you. Plenty to tackle. Of course, we've got stuff happening today, including Governor J.B. Pritzker set to sign the energy omnibus bill that passed during fall veto session, and Republicans saying it's going to increase energy costs substantially. So the governor's going to be signing that this morning up in Joliet. Plus, we've got a news conference from former state senator and Republican gubernatorial candidate Darren Bailey. He is set to be outside the governor's ceremonial office here in Springfield this morning for a news conference. So we'll be monitoring that as well. Plus, the Illinois State Board of Election has their ballot certification vote today. So that's going to be happening where we'll get more certainty what's going to be on the March primary ballot, and particularly statewide, who are the Republican candidates that are going to be challenging themselves to hopefully go on and challenge Governor J.B. Pritzker in November. Plus, you've got the U.S. Senate race with candidates on both sides. Could be a pretty large ballot for the primary, and even some races across the state that are of pretty big importance in other statewide offices like Attorney General and Treasurer and Comptroller and such. But again, this is just for the primary, not for the November election. So we'll find out who's going to be on the ballot for the March primary today. So that's just some of the stuff going on today. Obviously, yesterday, big news day. A lot of focus on what's going on with the fraud allegations and investigations in Minnesota. But you did have also in Minnesota a police-involved shooting, a fatal shooting. A woman being shot while she was in her vehicle, allegedly aiming that vehicle at an ICE officer. Obviously, video showing all angles, investigations ongoing. But you have Illinois Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who's running for U.S. Senate. She's filed articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem. And Governor J.B. Pritzker also jumping on that to say that for months, Trump's DHS has wreaked lawless havoc in our neighborhoods, tear gassing infants, families, and police, firing their weapons at peaceful citizens, killing innocent people, he says. It's brutal, unconstitutional, out of control. It must stop. Kristi Noem must go now. So the governor sounding off on that on X. So obviously that's something you're going to hear a lot more about throughout the day, about the fatal police shooting involved over in Minneapolis. So a lot to tackle today. That's just what we're covering today. All right. But we've got plenty more to get to here with Illinois in Focus daily. All right. So stay tuned. We'll talk about the energy bill. We'll revisit some of the debates that was had back during October veto session and the concerns there are for manufacturers about the energy cost this bill could increase. So we'll hear about that in advance of the governor signing that bill. But up next, we'll delve into the Health and Human Services saying Governor Pritzker needs to show the receipts on welfare spending. So that's up next here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning for more from the Center Square.
when states send us a funding request for a legitimate program, we're going to start saying, just show us some receipts. I think in some states it looks like there might be an informal political patronage system going on with providers and state officials looking the other way because they're part of this same political coalition.
Assistant Secretary for DHHS, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Jim O'Neill talking with me yesterday about the funding freeze for Illinois and other states and how they're just simply asking for some receipts. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. I'm with you each and every weekday morning here for the Center Square. And listen, the focus on what's going on with the alleged fraud in Minnesota is clearly top headlines across the country, but it's got other states looking at their own systems and whether or not there's fraud. But the federal government is now taking the efforts to freeze that money. And I'll share with you the conversation I had with Jim O'Neill coming up from the Trump administration. But I also talked with Truth in Accounting founder and CEO Sheila Weinberg about some of the audits that she's been looking at. These are single audits, and she shares her thoughts on reading some of the audits from Illinois and how there were some not too favorable findings in some of these audits.
And there were two, the auditors gave Illinois two adverse opinions, which meant that the state agencies were passing money, but they were not ensuring whether that money was being used for authorized purposes.
Now, the adverse opinion is clearly kind of auditor language for it doesn't look too good. But there's other language as well. But she talks about the ongoing audits, and in particular, one audit she saw that had an adverse opinion was dealing with housing funds, tax dollars being used for housing.
Well, at the Housing Assistance Fund, which was a fund set up at COVID to help people, with home ownership during COVID, the Illinois Department of Human Services failed to conduct monitoring whether this money again was used properly. And there's approximately $177 million that was distributed without the state considering whether risk was involved, any oversight, and it caused the auditors to say that there were material problems with this.
Material problems, and we're talking about your tax dollars, be it federal money or state money. And Weinberg said she did also look at some child care program audits. And these audits, by the way, you can find yourself through the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and that is the website, app.fac.gov. So the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, you can go through and search for audits. So Weinberg did just that and found a whole host of different types of audits, including audits about how Illinois handles child care tax dollars.
Yeah, child care was not as, in Illinois, child care did not have as many problems that the auditors found in Illinois. But they did get the Child Care and Development Fund did get what they call qualified opinions, which indicated there were material compliance weaknesses, or there just wasn't enough evidence, audit evidence, to determine whether the money was being spent properly.
Now, the single audits she's talking about that you can find at the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, she says, are important audits that people need to keep in mind and review.
The single audit seems to be reporting the problem, and then the federal government doesn't follow up to make sure that the problems were corrected. The state, there are many of these qualified opinions that have been going on for years. And what that means is that the taxpayer dollars are being spent, and there's just, there's not the efficient, essential accountability for that. And so we do not, the auditors didn't have confidence that the public funds are being used for what they were intended for. They couldn't determine that.
There's a lot of public confidence being shook right now, especially with the stories coming out of Minnesota. And I mean, listen, here in Illinois, we've been looking at these audits with Truth in Accounting I've been talking with Sheila Weinberg from Truth in Accounting for 11 years. And every year, it's Illinois is always getting an F on their financial reports. Illinois audits, they take forever to come out, and a whole host of other things. But she says this is definitely happening in other states as well.
California, they also got this adverse opinion, meaning they, flunked compliance, and they just said that they didn't follow the procedures where the state needs to go out and make sure that these child care facilities are, living up to health standards and safety standards. So, that's a major problem there. I've looked at Delaware in detail. They're having problems. So I think, and we're just starting to look at this in detail to determine how bad this is. But I suspect it's going on in a lot of
A
states.
lot of states, and even the vice president telling Fox News that they believe in the days and weeks and months ahead, they're going to uncover substantial amounts of suspected fraud all across the country and what that's going to look like. Now, again, Weinberg has been looking at this for years. I've been talking with her about these financial audits and these adverse opinions that would pop up here and there, and these qualified opinions and these material weaknesses, and what kind of follow through is there? There really has never been much of a concern, at least from leadership, in how they handle this, or efforts that are clear and over the top, giving confidence to the taxpayer that their dollars are being used appropriately. Weinberg says she's kind of amazed that the federal government really hasn't stepped in up until at least now.
Well, it amazes me in the past that, at Truth in Accounting, we've highlighted these issues, some of these issues, and people just didn't seem to have concern. The other issue was that, the federal government and the state is getting information about these problems, and some corrective action is being made. But in the past, why did the federal government keep on giving these states money if they weren't monitoring the money properly?
Well, I asked that question to a Trump official yesterday after I chatted with Sheila, and Jim O'Neill, he sat down with me briefly, and we talked about the efforts the Trump administration is taking to combat fraud and the impacts on Illinois. I got his response to Governor J.B. Pritzker saying that the funding freeze is cruel and that Pritzker is going to do everything he can to protect those impacted. Got Jim O'Neill's response to that, plus his response to Sheila Weinberg on the question of why did it take the federal government so long to do this. Greatly appreciate being joined by the Department of Health and Human Services Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill. Thanks for taking time with us. And if you could just kind of give us a lay of the land here, how much across the country are we talking in the freezing of federal tax funds, and how much is going to possibly be withheld here from a state like Illinois?
Sure. So every week we find out more. The scope of the apparent fraud seems to get bigger. We've been tracking this for a while, and we've been doing everything we can to ensure that we do not send any federal money to any state that's going to go to fraud. That's true on childcare, that's true on welfare, that's true on Medicaid, and many other departments are doing the same thing in state after state.
So if you could explain a bit about the types of fraud that you're looking at, especially when it comes to a state like Minnesota that we've seen reported on, but how come Illinois is included in that mix?
Well, everywhere we have a significant suspicion or evidence of fraud, we are turning on our defend the spend system, which instead of just automatically sending money to a state when they request it, we now automatically require evidence and receipts, some kind of proof that the state is actually sending money to a real provider that's providing a real service and not something that's a scam. And that's, could be true in all 50 states. And we're trying to, ensure that we have integrity in all 50 states, but also, of course, putting special attention to whatever hotspots we notice.
And so I take it the 5 states or so that are part of this funding freeze, including Illinois, close to, $10 billion, if not more. There's been some hot spots, you're saying?
Yes. So, yes, there's $10 billion of federal child care and family assistance money in 5 states that we have frozen as we investigate and make sure that it's not going to fraud. So this includes our major welfare program called TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is over $7 billion. The Social Services Block Grant, which is a big welfare grant to states, that's just under $1 billion, as well as the Child Care and Development Fund. And then the broader child care uh, federal program that also goes to states. We put the defend the spend on that beginning of last week, insisting that uh, states provide receipts when they ask for money.
If you could elaborate a bit on that and just get your reaction to Governor J.B. Pritzker, who said that this was wrong and it's cruel, and he says that he's going to take every step possible to defend those who are impacted by this. What steps should he take to rectify the funding issue?
Yeah, what he should do is uh, fight fraud, make sure that his state is not spending either state money or federal money on fraudulent providers, whether it's in Medicaid or childcare or any other federally funded or frankly state funded program. So many states have been very lax. Um, I think in some states it looks like there might be an informal political patronage system going on with providers and state officials looking the other way because they're part of this same political coalition. And political machines are something that we've seen in American history, and it's important that elections be free and fair, and that taxpayer money only be spent on the purposes and the vulnerable populations that Congress and legislatures have decided to spend it on. And every layer of government has a really important responsibility to provide checks and make sure that all the money is being spent in the right way.
And this program you've implemented, it's meant to have states report back to you guys about every request that they're going to draw. And what should they be responding with? Should they be responding with audits showing where the money's going, or how will the HHS actually determine whether or not the money's properly used?
There are some audits going on, but uh, we're not trying to slow things down. We're not slowing things down. We're just saying when states send us a funding request for a legitimate program, we're going to start saying, just show us some receipts. It doesn't have to be very extensive. It just has to be some kind of evidence. We're even open to multiple kinds of evidence. It just has to be real. And we have to know that the states know that it's real and that they're willing to provide evidence that it's real. It doesn't have to take a long time. It's not intended to be a delay. It's just a requirement. We're not going to be an automated money machine.
And finally, I talked with Truth in Accounting. They're a financial watchdog looking at government spending, and they said that some single audits of various Illinois programs indicates that there's several adverse findings, which aren't good in audits. There's also kind of maintenance audits and a variety of other things within some of these programs, including material compliance audits that really doesn't allow for the auditors to prove how that money was used. She says she's curious. She's been looking at these findings, at least in Illinois and elsewhere, for years. And I've been talking to her about it for years. She's curious why it took the federal government so long to have some follow through and to actually make sure those dollars are being properly used.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear all that. I would say that fighting fraud involves a past component, like catching people that have committed fraud in the past, prosecuting them, clawing the money back. There's also like a audit component, the recent past, like double checking what's happened recently, looking for fraud. When states do that, that's good. There's also the future component, making sure that new money does not go out the door unless we're sure it's not going to be used for fraud. And we're trying to cover all three of those phases of time are important to fight fraud, and we're doing all three.
HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill, thank you so much for taking time. Anything else you think's top of mind for taxpayers to know about what the Trump administration is doing here? Is this just the beginning with welfare programs to make sure that things are going to be on the up and up and that they're properly used? What else could we see in the future?
Well, the Biden administration unfortunately put in some regulations that made it harder for states to fight fraud. It limited their ability to ask for receipts. We are repealing those regulations. We just started that process to get rid of those pro fraud regulations. So You can expect that later this year we'll finish that process and we'll actually empower states to fight fraud, better than the Biden people did.
Again, appreciate you taking the time with us, HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Really lovely talking to you.
It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. You can wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with the Center Square to get a breakdown of things impacting you, the taxpayer, because you're funding government across the board. Not just your local governments, not just your state governments, but even those federal tax dollars that your state and local governments give back. So how that money's being spent seems to be a top focus of the Trump administration, seeming to go against years of previous policies, kind of looking the other way. According to the Trump administration, they're changing all of that. So we'll see what happens and how Illinois is impacted right here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Go to thecentersquare.com and get the newsletter in your inbox each and every weekday morning, only with the Center Square. Governor J.B. Pritzker set to sign an energy omnibus bill this morning to change Illinois energy policy with a continued focus on renewable energy and battery storage. And they're also lifting the moratorium on nuclear energy. But a lot of opponents saying it's merely going to increase the price of energy for businesses and customers across the state, because we still have those deadlines in place to close coal-fired power plants. It is Illinois in Focus Daily with you. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at thecentersquare.com for Illinois, so go check that out. So with the governor set to sign this bill up in Joliet this morning in just about, 2 hours from now, you've got the question of what exactly this thing does. A whole host of things. So some moments from the past when they were debating this in the halls of the General Assembly. Here is just some of the back and forth during some news conferences, separate news conferences about energy policy from alternative energy advocates, consumer advocates, and Democrats and Republicans on either side of this.
The issue of energy capacity here in Illinois. The spikes that we have seen beginning in June on the customers' bills is unacceptable. We have to act, and we have to act today, and we have to act tomorrow and get this through this veto session, because we can't go through another summer of these horrendous spikes in electricity bills. This will address that. It was mentioned that this will provide $13 billion in net benefits to the customers. That's residential customers, that's manufacturing customers as well.
Now, I watched the previous press conference. They blamed it on several things. I will tell you why your prices are going up. Because capacity is being forced offline. Natural gas plants in the state are being forced offline. Natural gas is the cheapest way to provide capacity, which is what we need because of the new economy, the AI economy that you hear about. We all agree that we need more power. I agree with my colleagues that just spoke. Many states are looking at how to solve this problem. The difference is, in all of the other states that they mentioned, they're building out natural gas combined cycle plants to be able to power their data centers. They're not doubling down on expensive renewable power, such as wind and solar, and now battery, and transmission lines built in to move the power from another state from wind and solar that are paid by ratepayers.
As we in Illinois face soaring electric bills, market architects applaud these high price outcomes for sending strong market signals. Well, then it's time for our state to respond to these signals and act now to protect Illinois consumers. SB 25 gives us the tools to do that. These tools, such as energy efficiency, battery storage, virtual power plants, and optional time of use rates, can work on a system-wide level to cost-effectively help us avoid electric price volatility. But they're also tools that regular residential electric customers can deploy at home to take control of their own energy bills.
This bill was written by special interest groups and rubber stamped by the governor's administration, leaving Illinois families to pay the price. It lifts the caps that protect consumers, hands sweeping new powers to unelected regulators, and doubles down on unreliable energy sources that simply cannot sustain our state's power needs. This proposal will lead to higher electric bills, less reliability, and fewer options for families and manufacturers alike.
So that's both sides here of the debate about Senate Bill 25 that came together during fall veto session. You had news conferences about it, a lot of hearings about it, a lot of ink spilled over it, as they say. You've got, when it got to the floor of either chamber, the debate continued, and the concerns were raised that this reliance on battery storage subsidies on top of wind and solar subsidies, while closing coal-fired power plants and natural gas-fired power plants, it's not going to be enough to cover the demand. And the demand is why we've seen the rates continue to go up. It's a mix of high demand and low capacity. Here's more of the debate from fall veto session on the Senate and House floor back in October.
As I mentioned at the beginning, that item will be immediately offset because that's the same date that the battery storage providers will start providing extra capacity, providing power to the grid, and that will offset that cost. And as I've said numerous times before, the dividends will continue to pay down the road. There will be billions of dollars of savings by the additional generation caused by the battery storage because they're very effective at dealing with those peak demands. And customers will see more capacity and lower bills in the years ahead because of how this is structured.
The bill is an $8 billion rate increase. It asks Illinois families to foot the bill for the state's latest energy experiment, and the result will be higher electric bills, fewer reliable power sources, and more special treatment for the politically connected.
We can get into the finite nature of batteries and the rest of it, but the Democrats have a long history of helping utility payers. Former Speaker Mike Madigan, that I had a brief period of working with, about 26 days, and a former head of a major power company, and the number 2 nationally, are both in prison for helping utility payers in the state of Illinois. Then we have CEJA a few years ago. We got within 24 hours of shutting down 2 nuclear plants. And my Democrat friends in the aisle combined the threat of a shutdown of Seneca and Byron with a bunch of crummy ideas in a CEJA bill. So I decided to work with the Democrats and voted for CEJA. I've regretted it ever since. And now we have this non-guarantee of future rate reduction. Please, please, Democrats, stop helping utility payers across the state of Illinois. They cannot afford any more of your expensive help. Ronald Reagan said it best. The scariest words from politicians are, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. Utility payers in Illinois cannot afford your well-intentioned, bad, expensive ideas.
We should be looking at natural gas to produce more energy, not just find a way to store a non-base load production. The reality is we've passed FEJA, which increased rates. We've passed CEJA, which increased rates. And now we're going back to ratepayers saying, oh, give us one more try. Third time's a charm. Let us pass this and it'll lower your rates. The reality is that none of this will be online for at least 5 years. So energy prices are going to continue to rise because of FEJA and CEJA. They're going to continue to rise.
Again, that's the debate that happened amongst the elected state officials, and it ultimately did pass with Republican opposition not really amounting to something that could stop the supermajority Democrats in either chamber of the General Assembly. But But it's not just those politicians sounding off on their concerns. The Illinois Manufacturers Association also sounding off on their concerns. Last month, we chatted with Mark Denzler. He is the president and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association, and he shared with us that a recent report from several state agencies highlights that the current trajectory the state's on isn't going to cut it, and going to batteries also isn't going to cut it. And it's just going to lead to higher costs for consumers and manufacturers.
We didn't need a 200-plus page report to tell us what we already need. The fact is, Illinois is in crisis when it comes to energy, as are many states around the country. And quite frankly, what the report says, what we already knew and what the IMAs testified to, is that the demand doesn't meet the generation. It's simply supply and demand. And as we've seen growth from manufacturing and quantum and data centers, at the same time that state policies are resulting in the closure of baseload energy, coal, gas, and even nuclear across the country, it's simply a supply and demand issue. And this report says that Illinois is going to struggle, and there's going to be a date in the near future where we may not have enough power to meet the demand we need. Keep the current generational plants going, the clean coal plants and the gas plants, make sure they continue operating. Secondly, we have to invest in new generation. And we were happy that the nuclear moratorium was removed. That's going to take a few years. We need to add gas plants. Renewables are an important part of the mix, but it's an all the above strategy. We also have to invest in transmission lines and technologies like carbon capture and battery storage, so long as they're done in an affordable manner. But again, if the governor and lawmakers didn't hear the warning signs about capacity auctions, they clearly need to read this 200-page report. And again, I think a good first step, sending a message to the market, is keep those current plans. Particularly after this report's come out, we would encourage the governor to veto that bill, go back to the table, look at this report that, they should have waited until they saw this report in the first case and see what this said. And it clearly says you need to keep your current resources on board. And so, that sends a message. And again, renewables are part of it, but it also, this report says that they're not dispatchable. And during peak hours, they're part of the solution, but renewables are not the entire solution. And again, I think reading through this report, battery storage, there's a better way to finance it. Battery are important, but in this case, the legislation on the governor's desk, there's going to be a new line item on everyone's bill to pay for $7 billion of battery storage. And this report calls for 3 or 4 times that amount of battery storage. So again, the governor's going to sign the energy bill by all accounts. He supported it. Their team helped negotiate it. But this report clearly sends a message to the governor and General Assembly. They need to go back to the table, need to work on it. We know the bill that the governor's likely to sign is going to create the integrated resource planning and give those decisions to the Commerce Commission, to 5 people. And the General Assembly is going to kind of take itself out of it. But given that their consumers and constituents and businesses are going to face rate hikes, we think that they should pay more attention to this.
Again, that's Mark Denzler in a conversation I had with him last month, where he was encouraging the governor to veto the Energy Omnibus Bill, Senate Bill 25. Well, the governor's expected to sign that today up in Joliet. So we'll see exactly if he's asked to respond to the criticisms that this energy is just not enough, and we need to go back to coal and fire and natural gas-fired power plants. Yeah, it lifts the nuclear moratorium, but that's going to take a while for things to get fired back up. Should we just keep the existing coal-fired power plants that we have in place and allow for those investors to have certainty moving forward instead of a 2035 or 2040 cutoff date? So clearly, one thing that Denzler said there at the tail end was a concern that Republicans also raised, was that this legislation essentially takes away some of the decision making from legislators and puts it in to a state agency that is going to make the determination as to whether or not the kill switch needs to be flipped to stop the closure of coal-fired power plants or natural gas-fired power plants. When is that decision going to be made? Is it merely that, we've got a week's worth of blackouts that happened, or is it going to be an exorbitant cost that consumers are being asked to pay? I guess we'll see if any of these concerns are addressed when the governor goes to sign that legislation today. All right, so again, stay with us. It's Illinois in Focus. daily. Why? Because things happen daily. We need to keep you posted on what's going on so you can get on with your day, and that's what we do here with the Center Square. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the headlines in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com, click on newsletters, fill it out. It's free, it's open to you, and no paywall, promise. You get a lot of important and pertinent information, not just from Illinois, but from across the country. All right, so go check that out at thecentersquare.com. Greatly appreciate you guys taking part in the program each and every weekday morning. Got big things coming up to tell you about, so I definitely want you to stick around for the in-between segments and such, because we're blasting off in 2026, all right? So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. But appreciate everybody jumping into the chat room live, and the heated and civil debate at times in the chat room, but hopefully you're finding this program to be nourishing the information you need to know. All right, and that's what we strive to do here, is just tell you what's going on, not injecting opinion, just letting you know what's happening. All right, so it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Have a great rest of your Thursday, right? We'll be back to wrap the week up tomorrow with Illinois in Focus Daily and the Center Square.